At Christmas dinner, my dad laughed at my empty wallet. 30 minutes later, a phone call from the bank wiped the smile off his face forever. By the end of that night, the family that had treated me like a failure for years looked at me like they had never really known me. My name is Dorian Mercer, and I had just turned 30 that Christmas. If you had asked anyone in my family who was the biggest disappointment, they would have said my name without thinking twice. I wasn't lazy, and I wasn't irresponsible. I had spent years trying to build a small home restoration business, but success came slowly. Some months I made enough to pay my bills. Other months I barely got by. My father, Alden Mercer, never understood that. He believed a man's value came from the size of his paycheck. My younger brother, Sterling, had a high-paying corporate job, a beautiful house, and a new luxury SUV parked in his driveway. Dad talked about him like he had done everything right in life. Every family dinner became another chance to remind me that I wasn't like Sterling. My mother stayed quiet most of the time. She hated conflict, but she never defended me either. After a while, I stopped expecting anyone to. Christmas had always been my favorite holiday when I was a kid, but over the years it became something I wanted to get through as quickly as possible. Every December, our family gathered at my parents' house. The tree looked beautiful, the food smelled amazing, and everyone smiled for pictures. But behind those smiles, I knew exactly what was waiting for me. Someone would ask about my business. Dad would compare me to Sterling. Everyone would laugh at one of his jokes, and I would pretend it didn't bother me. That Christmas felt no different when I walked through the front door carrying a small gift for each family member. I smiled, hugged everyone, and tried to enjoy the evening. I kept telling myself that maybe this year would be different. I had no idea that before dinner was over, one unexpected phone call would uncover a family secret, expose years of betrayal, and change my life forever. The food was finally served, and everyone gathered around the large dining table. At first, the conversation was normal. My aunt talked about her vacation, my uncle complained about the weather, and my mother asked everyone if they wanted more mashed potatoes. I quietly filled my plate, hoping I could get through dinner without becoming the center of attention. That hope didn't last long. Dad raised his glass and smiled at Sterling. "I'm proud of you, son," he said. "Another promotion before 30. That's what hard work looks like." Everyone clapped, and Sterling thanked him with a confident smile. Then Dad looked across the table at me. "Dorian, maybe you should ask your brother for some career advice." A few people laughed. I forced a smile and kept eating. Karen leaned back in her chair. "Maybe next Christmas we'll all chip in and buy Dorian a business manual." More laughter filled the room. I looked down at my plate and stayed quiet. I had learned a long time ago that defending myself only gave them another reason to keep going. What none of them knew was that I had spent the last 3 years working almost every weekend. While they enjoyed holidays and vacations, I accepted every job I could find. I repaired old homes, restored damaged furniture, and even worked late into the night just to keep my business alive. There was something else they never knew. When Aunt Valerie fell behind on her medical bills 2 years earlier, I quietly paid one of her largest payments through my attorney so she would never know it came from me. When Uncle Raymond needed emergency repairs after a storm damaged his roof, I spent 2 weekends fixing it without charging him $1. I never told anyone because I wasn't looking for praise. The hardest part wasn't being short on money. It was sitting with people I had helped while they treated me like I had never done anything worthwhile. I glanced around the table. Everyone seemed comfortable. They laughed, told stories, and enjoyed the evening. No one noticed how quiet I had become. I told myself to stay calm. Christmas dinner would be over in another hour. I had no idea the worst part of the night hadn't happened yet. After everyone finished eating, Sterling stood up and picked up his glass again. He looked excited. "I've got some good news," he said. "That investment I made earlier this year finally paid off. I made enough to put a down payment on a vacation home." The table filled with cheers. Dad looked happier than ever. "That's my boy," he said proudly. "Always thinking ahead." My uncle asked Sterling a few questions about investing, and soon everyone was talking about money, savings, and future plans. One by one, each person shared something they wanted to achieve in the new year. Then Dad looked straight at me. "What about you, Dorian?" he asked. "How much have you managed to save?" The room became quiet. I took a sip of water before answering. "I'm putting everything back into the business right now." Dad shook his head with a disappointed smile. "So that's another way of saying you don't have any savings." A few people chuckled. Before I could say anything else, he leaned forward and pointed at my jacket hanging over the back of my chair. "I've got a better question," he said. Do you even have enough money in your wallet to pay for dessert if I handed you the bill? The laughter grew louder. I tried to ignore it. It doesn't matter, I said quietly. I'm doing the best I can. Dad wasn't finished. Without asking, he reached over, pulled my wallet from my jacket pocket, and waved it in the air like it was part of a magic trick. Dad, give it back, I said. He opened it anyway. He pulled out the few bills inside and counted them out loud. $43, he announced. 30 years old, and this is all he's carrying on Christmas. The room burst into laughter. Corinne covered her mouth, trying not to laugh too hard. Even my uncle shook his head with a smile. I looked toward my mother. She lowered her eyes and quietly folded her napkin. She didn't say a single word. Dad tossed the wallet back onto the table. You need to figure your life out, he said. This is embarrassing. I picked up my wallet and slipped it into my pocket. At that moment, I understood something I had refused to admit for years. I wasn't just being judged. I was being humiliated for their entertainment, and not one person at that table cared enough to stop it. The laughter slowly faded, but the silence that followed felt even heavier. I slipped my wallet back into my pocket and stared at the table. I wanted the evening to end. I was already thinking about making an excuse and leaving early. Then my phone started ringing. I looked at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize. The caller ID showed a private banking office from another state. I almost ignored it. I figured it was another sales call or someone trying to sell me a loan I couldn't afford. The phone kept ringing. Dad looked at me and smirked. Go ahead, he said. Maybe it's someone offering you a better job. A few quiet laughs came from around the table. Without saying anything, I answered the call. A calm woman introduced herself and asked if she was speaking with Dorian Mercer. I told her yes. She politely explained that she needed to confirm my identity before discussing confidential financial information. She asked for my date of birth, the last 4 digits of my social security number, and my current mailing address. I wondered what this was about, but I answered each question. She thanked me and paused for a moment. Mr. Mercer, she said, our records show that you are now eligible to access an account that has been legally restricted for several years. I frowned. I'm sorry, I replied. I think you've called the wrong person. We have confirmed your identity, she answered. The account belongs to you. None of it made sense. I don't have an account with your bank. There was another short pause. The account was established many years ago by Evelyn Mercer. The moment I heard my grandmother's name, my heart skipped. Grandma Evelyn had passed away several years earlier. She was the only person in the family who never made me feel like I wasn't enough. She always believed in me, even when my business struggled. I slowly stood up from my chair. The room had become completely quiet. No one was laughing anymore. Every eye was on me. Dad's smile disappeared as he watched my face. The woman continued speaking. She explained that the account had remained locked because of legal instructions left by my grandmother. According to those instructions, it could only be released after I reached my 30th birthday. I had turned 30 just 2 weeks before Christmas. I tightened my grip on the phone, trying to understand what I was hearing. Something told me this call was about to change far more than my bank account. I stepped away from the dining table so I could hear the woman more clearly. My hands were shaking, and I wasn't sure if it was because of what she was saying or because everyone in the room was staring at me. She explained that my grandmother had created a protected trust many years ago. It was designed so no one could touch it before a certain date. The money had stayed locked all this time because of her written instructions. The release date was tied to your 30th birthday, she said. Now that you have reached that age, the trust can finally be transferred to you after the legal process is completed. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Can you tell me how much is in the account? I asked quietly. She gave me the amount. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I honestly thought I had heard her wrong. The number was far beyond anything I had ever imagined. It wasn't just enough to pay my bills or save my business. It was enough to completely change my life. The woman told me not to discuss any financial details over the phone. She explained that I would need to visit a law office after Christmas, sign several documents, and verify my identity before the funds could be released. She also said there were personal papers left by my grandmother that would be given to me during the meeting. After thanking her, I ended the call. When I turned around, everyone was still watching me. Dad stood up first. What was that about? He asked. I hesitated. The bank said Grandma left me a trust. His eyes widened. A trust, he repeated. Sterling frowned. Corinne looked confused. My aunt slowly put her fork down. Dad walked closer. How much are we talking about? I don't know everything yet, I answered. They said I have to meet with an attorney after Christmas. He kept asking questions. Why didn't anyone know about this? Why would your grandmother keep something like that a secret? I didn't have an answer. That question stayed in my mind more than anything else. Grandma loved all of us, but she had hidden this from every member of the family. She had planned it years before she died. She knew exactly when I would receive it. She made sure no one could interfere. The money was shocking, but it wasn't what kept my mind racing. I couldn't stop wondering what Grandma had seen before she passed away that made her believe the secret needed to stay hidden from everyone, especially her own family. The first business day after Christmas, I drove to the law office the bank had given me. The building was older than I expected, with polished wooden floors and framed photographs covering the walls. A receptionist welcomed me and asked me to wait for the attorney handling my grandmother's estate. A few minutes later, an older man introduced himself as Mr. Holloway. He shook my hand and led me into a private office. Everything was already prepared. There was a folder with my name on it and several sealed envelopes. He checked my identification one last time before sliding the folder toward me. Your grandmother left very clear instructions, he said. She wanted you to receive these documents personally. I opened the folder. The first pages explained the trust, but I was more interested in the handwritten letter folded inside. I recognized Grandma Evelyn's handwriting immediately. She began by telling me how proud she had always been of me. She wrote that success wasn't measured by money but by character. Then her words became more personal. She said there were things I didn't know about my own family. Attached to her letter were notes she had written over many years. She had dated each one carefully. One note described a conversation she overheard between my father and another relative after I finished high school. Dad had said I wasn't worth spending money on because I would never accomplish anything important. He believed every opportunity should go to Sterling because he was the child most likely to succeed. I sat there reading the page over and over. Another note explained why Dad had refused to help me when I wanted to take a professional restoration course years earlier. He had the money. He simply chose not to spend it on me. Instead, he used that money to help Sterling start investing. Suddenly everything made sense. Every time I had asked for advice or support, I was told to figure things out alone. Sterling always had someone opening doors for him. I always had to find another way. Mr. Holloway quietly let me read without interrupting. When I finished the last page, he finally spoke. Your grandmother worried about something for a long time. He handed me another envelope. Inside was another short letter. Grandma explained that she never announced the trust because she believed people would pressure me into sharing it before I had the confidence to protect myself. She wanted me to reach an age where I could make decisions without fear or guilt. She wasn't trying to keep the family out. She was trying to keep me safe. For the first time in my life, I realized someone had seen everything I went through. She noticed every unfair comparison, every disappointment, every time I was left behind. She couldn't change what happened while she was alive, but she made sure that after she was gone, no one could take away the future she had carefully protected for me. The meeting with the attorney stayed on my mind for days. I didn't tell anyone what I had read in Grandma's letters. I needed time to think. I wanted to understand everything before making any decisions. That didn't stop the rest of the family from guessing. Somehow, word spread that the trust was worth much more than anyone had expected. The first call came from Dad. His voice sounded different. It was calm and friendly, almost like nothing had ever happened between us. How about you come over for dinner this weekend? He asked. It's been too long since we spent some time together. I almost laughed. For years, I had been the one calling him. Most of the time, he was too busy or simply didn't answer. Now he suddenly wanted to spend time with me. I politely told him I was busy. The next day, Corinne called. She said she missed me and thought we should make it a habit to have lunch together every week. That surprised me even more. My sister rarely contacted me unless she needed help moving furniture or fixing something around her house. Now she wanted to rebuild our relationship. A few days later, Sterling invited me out for coffee. He talked about family, trust, and sticking together. Then the conversation slowly changed. I've been thinking, he said. With your resources and my business experience, we could build something really successful together. There it was. The real reason for the invitation. He wasn't interested in spending time with his brother. He was interested in my money. Over the next 2 weeks, more relatives started reaching out. My aunt wanted to check on me. My uncle suddenly remembered my birthday and apologized for missing it. Cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years started sending holiday cards and leaving friendly voicemail messages. It felt strange watching people compete for my attention after ignoring me for so long. I answered politely, but I stopped believing their words. Before Christmas, I was the family disappointment. Now I was someone they wanted to impress. Nothing about me had changed. I was still the same person who worked long hours, drove the same pickup truck, and cared about the people around me. The only difference was what they believed I had in my bank account. That realization hurt more than I expected. Part of me had always hoped my family would eventually see my value. Instead, they only saw my value after they thought I had become wealthy. Grandma had understood something I was only beginning to accept. Money doesn't change people's character. It removes the mask they wear when they think you have nothing to offer. For the first time in my life, I stopped asking myself why they treated me differently. I already knew the answer. And I knew I would never let guilt or family pressure decide my future again. I could have confronted my family the moment I left the attorney's office. I could have shown them Grandma's letters and told them everything she had written about them. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed quiet. I wanted to see how far they would go without knowing that I already understood their real intentions. Dad called almost every other day. At first, he only asked how I was doing. Then he started bringing up money in small ways. One afternoon he said, "I've been thinking about remodeling the house. It would be nice to leave something valuable for the family one day." He never asked me directly for money, but he kept waiting for me to offer. I never did. Sterling became even more obvious. He showed up at my office with charts, business plans, and profit estimates. He acted like we had always dreamed of becoming business partners. "This could make both of us even richer," he said with a confident smile. I looked through the papers for a few minutes before handing them back. "I'll think about it," I answered. I already knew my answer. Corinne tried a different approach. She invited me to dinner at her house. For the first hour, everything felt normal. Then she sighed and started talking about her credit card debt and rising mortgage payments. She never actually asked for money. She didn't have to. The silence after her story said everything. I simply wished her the best and went home. Week after week, someone else found a reason to contact me. An uncle wanted advice about opening a business. A cousin suddenly wanted to reconnect after years of silence. Even relatives who had ignored me at family gatherings started calling just to check in. I noticed something strange. No one asked how I was feeling after learning about Grandma's secret. No one asked what her letters meant to me. No one cared about the years I spent struggling alone. Every conversation slowly found its way back to money. That told me everything I needed to know. I kept every message, every voicemail, and every email. Not because I planned to embarrass anyone. I wanted to remind myself later that Grandma had been right. One evening I opened the small wooden box that held her letters. I read one sentence that she had underlined. "Never confuse kindness with obligation." I closed the letter and sat quietly for a long time. For years I believed that if I worked harder and stayed loyal, my family would finally respect me. Now I understood that respect given only after money appears isn't respect at all. It is dependence. From that day forward, I stopped feeling guilty every time I said no. I wasn't planning revenge through anger or arguments. I was simply giving everyone the chance to reveal who they truly were. When they finished, I knew exactly what my final decision would be. About 3 months later, I called everyone and asked them to come to my office on Saturday afternoon. I told them I had something important to discuss about Grandma's estate. They all arrived on time. Dad looked unusually cheerful. Sterling carried a folder, probably another business proposal. Corinne smiled at me in a way she never had before. Even my aunt and uncle seemed excited. After everyone sat down, Dad spoke first. "So, what's the big news?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I placed Grandma's letters on the table. "I met with her attorney after Christmas," I said. "There are some things she wanted all of you to know." The room became quiet. I unfolded the first letter and began reading. Grandma wrote about watching our family for years. She described how one son was constantly encouraged while the other was expected to solve every problem alone. She wrote that love should never depend on success or money. She said she had watched that happen in our family for too long. No one interrupted. Dad slowly lowered his eyes. I read another part where Grandma explained why she kept the trust secret. She believed that if anyone knew about it before the right time, I would be pressured into giving away what she intended for my future. When I finished reading, the silence felt heavy. Sterling finally cleared his throat. "Dorian, we never meant for things to seem that way." I looked at him but said nothing. Corinne tried next. "If we hurt you, I'm sorry." Her words sounded polite, but they came only after the truth was sitting in front of everyone. Dad leaned forward. "I know I made mistakes," he said. "Let's move past them. We're still family." I took a slow breath. "I've thought about this for months," I replied. Grandma didn't leave me this inheritance so I could fix everyone else's financial problems. No one spoke. I'm not paying off debts. I'm not investing in family businesses. I'm not funding projects. Dad looked shocked. You would really say no to your own family? I met his eyes. You said no to me for years when I needed support. Grandma gave me this chance because she wanted me to build my own future. I carefully placed the letters back into their envelopes. I don't hate any of you, I said, but I'm done believing that money can create the family relationship we never had. No one argued after that. They quietly stood, gathered their things, and walked out one by one. For the first time in my life, I left a family meeting without carrying the weight of their expectations on my shoulders. Life didn't become peaceful overnight after that meeting. For several months, my phone kept ringing. Some relatives called to tell me I had become selfish. Others said Grandma would have wanted the family to stay together. A few even claimed that money had changed me. I listened without arguing. The truth was simple. The money hadn't changed me. It had changed the way they looked at me. Dad tried harder than anyone else. Every few weeks he called and asked if we could have coffee or dinner together. Sometimes he left long voicemail messages saying he wanted another chance to be a better father. I believed he regretted some of his choices. But regret could not erase years of hurt. Trust isn't rebuilt with words. It takes actions, and some opportunities never come back. I wished him well, but I kept healthy boundaries. For the first time in my life, I stopped trying to earn my father's approval. Instead of thinking about the past, I focused on my future. I expanded my restoration business, hired skilled workers, and opened a larger workshop. We restored old homes, historic buildings, and handmade furniture. The business grew slowly but honestly. Watching my employees succeed became one of the best parts of my life. Many of them reminded me of myself years earlier. Hardworking people who only needed someone to believe in them. I made sure they received the support I had always wished for. As the years passed, I bought a comfortable home. Not a mansion, just a place that felt peaceful every time I walked through the front door. There were no family arguments. No comparisons. No pressure to prove my worth. Sometimes I visited Grandma's grave with fresh flowers. I would sit there quietly and thank her. She gave me more than financial security. She gave me confidence when I needed it most. She reminded me that my value was never measured by the amount of cash inside my wallet. Looking back now, I don't think about that Christmas dinner with anger anymore. I think about it with gratitude. If Dad hadn't laughed at me that night, I might never have seen my family as clearly as I do now. That painful evening became the beginning of a better life. People often say the best revenge is getting even. I don't believe that. The best revenge is building a happy life without bitterness. It's waking up every morning surrounded by peace instead of disappointment. Grandma's final gift wasn't the inheritance. It was the chance to stop chasing acceptance from people who never intended to give it. That freedom became the greatest wealth I have ever received.